encourage your soul, enlighten your mind, and empower your faith. This is the Light Network. If you want to be a serious Bible student, a successful servant, and a powerful preacher, this is the podcast for you. Hello and welcome to Preachers in Training. My name is Robert Hatfield, and this is the podcast where we talk about all things preaching and ministry. Welcome to Season 14. This is Episode 1. As you know, we take a break during the summertime, and we have 2 seasons every year, and so we're in the second season of 2021 as we're recording this. Released August the 12th, 2021. Wow, I was almost 3 years behind. We're glad that you're a part of our episode today and looking forward to the episodes that are coming this season. We've pre-recorded quite a few of those, and all of them are requests from you, and I always look forward to the conversations that we can have. Today is no exception to that. We're going to talk about preaching that will reach the youth group. Are you interested? I know I am. And here to help us with that is Clark Sims, who is the pulpit minister for the North Tuscaloosa Church of Christ in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Welcome, sir. So glad to have you.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be with you, Robert. It means a lot to me. Thank you.
I've really been looking forward to this.
Yes, sir.
You serve as one of the elders of the congregation there too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
okay.
Sure do.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
You want to tell us a little bit about the congregation there? I know that you guys were a church plant not that too long ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? We started in May of 2015. We were a part of the Cottondale congregation and here in the Tuscaloosa County, and I preached there since 1999. And
wow.
But in 2015, a group of us planted a congregation here in the north part of the county in Tuscaloosa, and we started in 15, and we've been going ever since then. And we've been really blessed in this area to be a part of this community, very much so.
I assume I don't have to ask about the is that a stadium picture behind you up there on the desk? I assume I don't have to ask what that's a picture of.
You really don't have to ask, Robert. It's pretty clear.
Okay.
This is a room filled with crimson. You can be sure about that.
Okay. I root for the other team in Alabama. Sometimes I'm not really sure why.
I wasn't even sure there was one. Okay.
Yeah. Exactly. Maybe I should have mentioned that at the end of the episode after you've been here for the whole. Well, this will be an exercise of fellowship, right? So we'll see.
Very much so. Yeah.
I have
a niece. I have a niece that just went down to Auburn this week.
Okay.
And I reminded her she was going to the mission field, so I hope that whatever.
That's good. I can't even believe you would say the word. I can't believe it would cross your lips.
Well,
yeah.
Don't tell anybody.
Okay. It's just us talking. No worries. I first heard you preach at the Exposure Youth Conference that happens in December each year in Huntsville, Alabama.
Yeah.
And of course, I've gotten to hear you many other times since then at various venues and have always appreciated it. You do travel the youth circuit quite often, don't you?
Yeah. I've done it, I guess, for Robert, about 30 years, a little over 30 years now that I've been doing different things, speaking to young people. And it's been a blessing, for my life to get to be with, young people across the South, and just very thankful that I had that opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Well, your messages are always so powerful and clearly effective. They've been effective in my own heart, and you can tell by the public responses so often to the message that you preach, of course, when at those various events. But as I mentioned, also personally, it's touched my heart, and I'm so grateful for that.
Thank you, Robert. Yeah.
And when this episode suggestion came in from one of our listeners about preaching that'll reach the youth group, I mentioned a moment ago before we started that you were the first person that came to my mind. I'm interested in how we can be effective in doing this. I mean, obviously, as we're preaching Sunday to Sunday, and maybe you've got the youth group that sits in a section. For me, it's over to my right, and they're all sitting there together.
Yeah.
or whether they're scattered throughout the auditorium, whatever the case is, we certainly want to connect with them just as we want to connect with everyone.
Yeah,
And so it seems
absolutely.
appropriate to
Yeah.
discuss that
Yeah.
on this
Yeah.
podcast too.
Yeah. 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 I think it's it's an important subject. I just was thinking about before, we got into this conversation, like for the congregation where I am, I can remember when I was teaching and preaching to young people that are now, like one's a deacon of our congregation now, and
Wow.
one that I'd worked with when she was younger is the wife of our youth minister. I mean, so it's a real investment not only in your moment, but it's also it's going to pay dividends, down the line, one way or the other. Frankly, Robert,
Yeah.
just kind of how you handle that opportunity to preach God's word in front of young people is really going to be a big deal, not just for now, but also down the line.
Well, and the fact is true for parents, but it also is true for us
Yeah,
as preachers that those young people are only young people and at home for so often or for so long,
absolutely.
and
Yeah, that's
they
right.
we get to have whatever influence or impact that the Lord blesses us
Yeah,
to have on them too during that time, and we
yeah,
want to
very
manage
much so.
that and steward that in a good way.
Yeah, that's right. I agree completely.
So as we begin, I think you want to break our thoughts together into two different parts. We're ready to dive into the first one.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
All right.
Absolutely. The first thing I wanted to talk about for a little while is factors that take place before you preach, and
Mm,
to these young people and congregation in general. But when you initially wrote me about the possibility of this topic for us to discuss, and it's been a pretty good while now, and I've had it on my mind a lot. And Robert, I've been, like I said, I've been speaking to young people and, for 30 years plus, and kind of transitioned myself from being in a youth group to, working with as a counselor and just different roles of working with young people. But it was really after you gave me this topic that I just got to really thinking about it, and it hit me pretty hard. And that is just how massive the word youth is. We tend to talk about it in circles like there's this youth group, and we use it in a pretty specific term, and like it's really describing a singular grouping of people. But the truth is, it's just pretty incredible the diversity that you're going to find in a typical youth group. I know it is here. I know it's been,
mm.
my experiences through the years. So it's very difficult to just put in a box. I'm preaching to young people. When you think about it, Robert, the variety of, not just age, but and sex, but also interest and things of that nature. I mean, there's a lot of range in a seventh and eighth grader and a senior in high school.
Yeah.
So I've really kind of been humbled a little bit, even in thinking about our discussion, when I actually took a step back to really think about what it means to deal with the young. It's such a large group, and that was just one of the things that I think needs to be considered initially as you're talking with and preaching toward the youth group, and that is that they're not a singular group.
Mm.
There's a lot of factors to consider even in dealing with that, and so that's, like I say, this podcast has helped me already, so I'm thankful to you for that.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Yeah,
I guess I had sort of thought of that before. You get the opportunity to teach the teen class and things, and you quickly
yeah,
realize that they're coming out of
yeah,
different social contexts and things like that. But you're right. I mean, the weight
yeah,
of this, well,
yeah,
and we feel that as preachers, don't we, when we're thinking about, well, this sermon, I'm going to preach it, and it's going to be heard by young professionals, and it's going to be heard by moms of young children. At least a few words of it
yeah,
will, and then
yeah,
it's going to be heard
absolutely,
by
yeah,
Christians who have been Christians for 40 or 50 or beyond that years.
that's
And
right,
but
yeah,
yeah, when
yeah.
we think about connecting to the youth group, it's not as simple as it might sound on the surface.
It seemed like it's kind of changing even more as time has gone on, and Another thing I just thought was so important too before we ever even start talking about the preaching itself, and that is as the preacher here, and that's who's going to be primarily in our audience, and as the preacher, I think it's important that we don't make any assumptions,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like Robert, I've got 4 children myself, and my oldest is scheduled to hit 30 next month, and I've been raising and training children for a long time, and
Wow.
I know the responsibilities that God has placed at the doorstep of parents. And I know the responsibilities to bring up a child in the way you should go, and everything that goes along with that. And then I also think about even like in the church, and we have a youth minister. I know many congregations do, and they're in Bible classes, and I just say all of that to say, no matter what I know the responsibilities are for parents, for Bible class teachers, I still think it's important for preachers to not make any assumptions about what they think is being covered and what they think
Mm.
is being taught. I think we need to really take our personal responsibilities very seriously, Robert, and just to feel like, hey, that's our time, and that's our moment when we're standing behind that mic, and we're thankful for all that's good that's done in the home and in our Bible classes, but I think we're making a mistake when we make a lot of assumptions of what we think's happening that might give us maybe an excuse or a pass to not deal with things maybe as much as we should as the preacher, the one that's
Mm.
standing before them on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. And even like the fundamentals and stuff too, right? I mean, we may assume, everybody
Absolutely.
here's got that down.
Yeah,
That may
that's
not
exactly
actually be
right.
the case. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, I think assumptions can be a dangerous road because a lot of times when you discover the reality, it's a little bit too late. And
Mm-hmm.
you had mentioned too, Robert. I wanted to mention that you mentioned that and like you and many other people, have the opportunities to speak at a variety of places, and just thankful for those opportunities. But I do think it's important that we recognize that there is a significant difference in speaking and teaching and preaching to everybody's youth, and preaching to your own youth.
Mm.
I think there's a lot of difference in that time when it's that group that sits in front of you every Sunday that you know them on a little different level. When I'm blessed to speak to young people at events, in the South and that type of thing, it's you know, you see the faces, you see the physical traits, but you don't really know all of
Mm-hmm.
them. You're speaking in pretty, general terms to an age group, and but that group that you're around every Sunday, you're young people that you get to know and you get to spend time with. I think it's really important, Robert. I try to do it myself. That those young people, that youth group that we're talking about, that they know us as a preacher more than just that guy behind the mic, and
Mm-hmm.
and and, and we're basically wanting to have that same kind of relationship with them. I think that can be uh, really valuable from the standpoint of I think they listen to us perhaps on a different level when they know the person that we are. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of these factors that really take place before you ever step in behind the mic, I think they are very integral in being effective communicators of
Mm-hmm.
God's word, for sure.
Mm. That's
Yeah.
good. I think that first of all, we take for granted as preachers that people don't really know our personalities outside of the pulpit, and that's
Yeah.
not to say
Yeah.
we're somebody different up in front versus when we're not. But
Yeah.
it is a serious task preaching, and
Yeah. It really
it,
is.
if you have a lighter side to you, that might not come out as often when you're up there
Oh yes,
preaching the
that's
gospel.
exactly right. Yeah,
Yeah, but in
yeah,
addition to that too, what would you say to the fella who he wants that connection, but teenagers kind of tend to be in this position where they're looking down at their little piece of glass a lot, and
yeah,
or maybe they may perceive that they're kind of just talking to each other. The preacher may perceive they're just talking to each other, and they're kind of not in a
yeah,
position where it indicates they're really receptive of someone else coming up and engaging. How do you think the
yeah,
preacher can be a little more proactive at forming those relationships?
yeah. Well, I mean, I just think there's some simple little things that we can do just to establish that we're trying to be on the same page. I try to communicate with our congregation regularly, like through text messages,
Yeah.
and I've tried to do that, including that with our young people, and just I'll drop them a text every now and then, and they'll do that to me, and
Mm.
I just of course I've kind of come up, Robert, kind of where I've been involved. And I think you might have mentioned it too earlier, but like where I've taught in classes with the young people, and I've
Yeah.
directed a week of Bible camp for 18 years now. So like for many of our young people, I've been a part of their lives,
Hmm.
for a considerable amount of time. And, so when you're kind of invested in a congregation, and you've been here for a number of years around the same people, just to be honest, you have a little bit of advantage
Yeah.
in that connecting area
That's right.
versus somebody who's maybe just come in periodically and hadn't really spent a lot of time. My children have been raised, so
Yes.
I've raised my children watching these other young people growing up, and
Hmm.
I think that makes a difference. It kind of gives you a little heads up in formulating these relationships with the
Mm.
young people. It's uh, you know, but I do think for anybody, it's going to have to take some intentional effort on the preacher's part to reach out and there's a saying, Robert, that I think about, that and sometimes I think it would apply to this situation that the people that need it the most don't necessarily make it easy,
Uh,
so you were talking about the young people with their eyes on the phone and stuff like that. It kind of takes an on purpose decision on the preacher's part to want to formulate these kind of relationships, and
hmm.
and not give up when it gets us, some of them are a work in progress, and we're a work in progress too.
Hmm.
So and by the way, I was going to tell you, Robert, too. I think one of the really important things that we need to factor in, before we ever stand up to preach in the presence of young people or anybody else, and that is to really have a consciousness of who the makeup of your congregation is. And I just
Mm.
think it's pretty tough for us to formulate our "this is what I always do," and it doesn't matter who the makeup of that congregation is, the
Oh yeah.
dynamic, the kind of the interest and where you come from and culture of that environment. I'm sure being here in Central Alabama is a different environment than it might be in some of our larger cities, and I just think things like that really they really do factor in. I tell you where I learned it, Robert. I learned it uh, prior to preaching full time. I taught elementary school,
Oh.
and I remember when I was a student at the University of Alabama, and I'll try to make consistent University of Alabama references during
Thank
this
you.
podcast.
I
But
appreciate it.
but I remember when I was a student at Alabama in my training to be an elementary teacher. It was just like with every class basically that I had, I was taught by experts in the field, but these people had not really been in a classroom in a long time, if ever. And you just kind of got the idea that you were being instructed in a best case scenario, all the resources, all the time. And then
Mm.
when I got a job and I walked into a classroom for the first time, and the reality of where you are really hits.
Mm.
And I just think that needs to be on our mind to really have a consciousness of who the people are that are a part of that congregation that's become your church family. And I really believe the way their interest and their dynamic is something that needs to be really factored into our preaching and the way the
Mm.
message is delivered and things of that nature. There needs to be a level of adapting, a
Yeah.
willingness to adapt, I think, as we stand before people.
Mm. Wow. It wasn't long after I moved here to Gold Hill Road, and same thing was true when I was down in Charleston, South
Yeah,
Carolina, that they asked me if I'd be willing to teach a quarter of the teenage class. And
yeah,
I jumped. I said, I would love to teach a
yeah,
quarter with them because
yeah,
I knew that was going to be a good opportunity for me to connect with them and get to know them,
sure.
and they would get to know me a little better. And I'm a little different in a Bible class than I am when I'm up
Yeah,
preaching,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah,
and that has
yeah,
been, and people are always, it seems like they were surprised when I
yeah,
jumped it. They said, "You want to do that?" And I said, "I
yeah.
would love to do that. I think
Oh,
that's
yeah,
wonderful." And I encourage preachers to the point that you're making here. I mean, before we can really preach to these people, that's not to say that, I mean, obviously you're preaching sermons and things, but before we can really connect, we need to know who they are. And I think in Bible class is one way, but like you say, camps and retreats and devos and just fun activities or whatever. I mean, if you can be a part of
yeah,
that, that makes
yeah,
a big
absolutely.
difference.
Yeah. Those 15 minutes before service and
Yeah,
15 minutes after
yeah,
makes a lot of difference too.
that's
Just
right.
to, just seeing the person you are kind of really helps to establish a credibility when you're standing in front of them. There's
Mm-hmm.
no doubt about that.
Mm. So, we got some factors before we preach. Wow, I
Yeah.
appreciate those.
Yes,
It sort
sir.
of
Yeah.
sounds like we were transitioning and we're ready to talk about now when we're preaching. Is that correct?
Yeah. Now this is kind of some things I think for us to really think about when we're actually preaching in a way that would reach the youth group. And I just, I take the perspective myself, Robert, and I've experienced it, a lot in my own life. But a lot of effective preaching that will reach the youth group would also hopefully be valuable for everybody, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe be presented in ways that would be really understandable. So the first thing that I wanted to mention about when you're actually preaching, and that is be conscious of controllable elements. And what I mean by that is you really need to be aware as the preacher of, am I doing the best that I can? Am I preparing? Am I considering the need for the way that it's presented? I just, and I tell you the reason I kind of developed and thought about this idea of controllable elements, Robert, is I was dealing with a lot of stress in my life and in my ministry, and I found myself really burdened down by things that are completely out of my control.
Hmm.
How somebody reacts or what they say, or am I looking out in the audience and how's somebody responding with their eyes to the message or something,
Mm.
and Robert, you can just wear yourself out by by things that you can't control. So
Yeah.
so I want to have a focus on, am I standing up there doing the very best I can? Am I prepared? Am I ready? Do I have that audience in my mind? And specifically for our purposes today, am I thinking about the young people themselves as I prepare? I got a couple of quotes I'd like to share with you that have meant a lot to me, and I think it really applies to this idea of, as the preacher, as the controllable guy, am I doing the best I can? One of them was by Bill Parcells, Robert, and I thought it was really a neat quote. He said, "Don't ever let good enough be good enough." And I
Mm.
thought about that, how just it's so easy for adequacy to kind of control the day.
Yeah.
I don't know about your experience, Robert, but I've been speaking in front of people, you know, for myself for over 45 years. I mean, I
Wow.
started when I was young, and I can't fix a car. I don't know how to do construction on my house, but I have spoken in front of people. It's just something that I can do, and if you're not careful, when you have experiences like me and you and all these and so many other people have, uh, we can be good enough that we don't have to put our best into something to
Yeah.
survive. Does
Hmm.
that make sense? I
Yes,
mean,
it does.
and I just think we need to ever keep in front of us the challenge to be the best that we can be. And I think the audience and specifically those young people, they deserve that from us. Kobe Bryant was speaking to Alabama's football team several years ago, not long before he passed away. But when he was speaking to the team, he had this statement. He said, let me get it right. When excellence becomes a habit, then that's just who you are. And I
Mm.
think about the significance of how important it is for me to give my very best. I think I think people in the audience can tell that, and so I really believe there's a value in me stepping on that stage, me standing there with the Bible in my hand, knowing that I have prepped and I'm ready to do the very best I can. I just
Hmm.
I don't want to get up there and that not be the case.
Yeah.
So
Well, and to
in
your
my
point,
actual
yeah, to
yeah
your point, it gives you that peace too. I mean, you said you were stressed about all the stuff that you can't
yeah
control, but yeah, when you do,
yeah
you got that control to you. Wow.
yeah yeah
You
yeah
you
just
could have just said Kobe Bryant said. You didn't have to say the circumstances under
yeah,
which he
yeah.
said it.
I want to give you a little context,
I,
Robert,
I
to make sure
appreciate
you
it.
knew
Thank you. That's
yeah,
good.
kind of knew exactly what was going on.
I appreciate that.
Okay. Now this one is a little more specific,
Hmm.
uh, and it's kind of been, and I think it's just I've really let it be kind of a driving force for my preaching and teaching for a long time. But I wanted to put the point out there today that don't do too much in a particular lesson. I think there's a lot of value in driving home what you want to get across, and I really believe that sometimes you can try to do so much
Hmm.
that they're not really getting anything. It's not about, Robert, people being impressed with how much I know.
Hmm.
It's more about a message being able to be conveyed that they can understand and make application to. Years ago, back in the mid '80s, I was a student at Lipscomb, and I remember I was taking a youth ministry class, Robert, and it was taught by a man named Jim Moss, and he was a youth minister in a large congregation in the Nashville area at that time. And I remember one of the things that he really drove home to that class, and I've really kept it in front of me in my preaching and teaching. But he said, if you get out of a Bible class, and I think it applies to preaching as well. He said, but if they come out of that class and they've learned one thing, then that's really a good use of your time.
Hmm.
And I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it makes a lot of sense that in a focused period of time that they're able to come out. They walk out in the foyer on a Sunday morning, and there's something that they really called, or something that was really brought to their attention that they remembered. One of the biggest compliments I can ever get as a preacher, and I know you can relate to this, Robert, is when you see somebody, young or old, and a good bit of time has gone by, and they're able to share with you a phrase that they've remembered from a particular sermon that you
Hmm.
presented. And with the young people in mind, I really think that's something to keep in front of ourselves, to not really try to do too much in a given lesson, and I think that really can lead to quality, in your presentation.
Yeah. Let me ask you, just in the general preaching now, I mean, is that sort of your mantra for all sermons, or do you do that maybe for certain topics that you think the youth really need to be emphasized toward? Or in other words, is this
Yeah.
always sort of your philosophy?
Well, it's generally my philosophy with, in every area of preaching, that,
Yeah.
you know, not, not and I don't mean this in any kind of a dumbing down way,
Right,
but
right.
I'm really talking about it more from the standpoint of an idea, of a concept,
Got
of a
it.
scripture or something, being driven home on such a level that it can really enhance the understanding of what you're saying, so that we want it to stick. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
we want it to stick, and we want it to be something that they think about and that they consider, and
Mhm.
uh, you know, and I guess, to be honest with you, uh, I think I'm just kind of a product of that's the best I can do. I'm not really,
Mhm.
I'm at my best, I think, when I'm as a preacher, when I'm trying to be really relatable and really just, to stand on a concept, and to let that really be kind of driven home. I'm very impressed with the people that the preachers that, can do so much more seemingly than I have the capacity to do in a given setting. But I try to be who I am, and that's what
Mhm.
I try to do, to just drive home things, and hopefully they'll remember it as time goes on.
Yeah. I was reading a book earlier this year about Fred Rogers, and
Yeah,
his wife was being interviewed about his life and what he had
yeah,
done, and she commented that people often thought that Mr. Rogers was just sort of naturally that simple, and he
yeah,
was obviously very simple. And
yeah,
she said no. She
yeah,
said he would be writing speeches for something. He had to go speak at a graduation ceremony or something like that, and she said he
yeah,
would be pacing the room with different drafts of his speech, saying,
yeah,
"No, it needs to be simpler. Simpler is better.
yeah, yeah,
Simpler is better." She said that's what he repeated over and over again.
yeah,
And
yeah.
there's something to that. To
Yeah, it
your
really
point,
is.
yeah.
Yeah, I told myself, like I told you before I went into preaching full time, I taught elementary school, and I've got people in my life and people in my family. I've got doctors and accountants and architects, and people that have risen very high professionally. But one of the things I told myself, is when I was teaching second grade, we were teaching things about math that they can't get to these points if they don't get the basic fundamental foundation of those simple addition and subtraction and
Mm,
multiplication tables and all. Those things have to be there. And for our young people, as they're being taught, as they're being hearing sermons, and hopefully with Bibles in their hands, that they're getting things that they'll be able to carry on with them for the rest of their lives. And
hmm
so,
yeah.
I don't think we ever need to abandon, us, simplicity, and I just think that don't do too much in a lesson
Yes.
has really, kind of served me well.
Yeah. So when we're preaching, we need to be conscious of controllable elements. I'm going to do the very
Yeah,
best that I can do, and I don't need
yeah,
to do too much in a particular lesson. It can get convoluted, can it, if I'm trying to
yeah,
pack too much in there? Uh,
yeah, absolutely.
yep. Other
Uh,
thoughts that we need to add to these?
yeah, okay. I'm going to tell you this, Robert, and this one is a point of frustration for me, because I know the right question to ask. You know, I know what I want to get out right now in this podcast. I know the right question. I'm really struggling to find the answer,
Hmm.
and the truth is, I don't really think I know the answer exactly, but I do know the right question,
Hmm.
and that question is: are they getting it? Are they Are they grasping what we're talking about? Are they understanding to the point of to the point of application.
Mm.
I spent much of it's really been fairly recent, to be honest with you, in my ministry. I mean, as an adult, where I began to appreciate just the significance of the three primary stories that Jesus told from Luke 15.
Mm.
You know, I spent a lot of my life just kind of thinking the sheep and the coins and the lost boy were all the same thing. And I just kind of thought, if I can ever I'll just get to the prodigal son, just get me to the prodigal son.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really pay a lot of attention to the other ones as much as I needed to. So over time, I've really had some situations happen to me, kind of from an assignment standpoint of preaching or listening to people that I really enjoy listening to, but have really developed an appreciation for these other ones, the sheep and the coin, and for our purposes today, the lost coin. Man, Robert, it ought to really affect us, because the picture that Jesus paints in Luke 15 about the lost coin is that coin was lost in the house. You know, that coin was lost in the very place it was supposed to be. And so, you know, I think about our auditoriums, and I think about who's sitting out there, and the truth is, you know, I could be standing up there looking into their eyes, and Robert, they could be sitting there, you know, struggling and, you know, as lost as they can be. And and it really is a frustration for me. I'm sure it is for a lot of people to, are they getting those things that we're talking about?
Mm.
Are the concepts sticking? Are they remembering them? You know, I really believe we struggle in the church. We struggle, as it relates to the church. I think parents struggle with it, and I think Bible classes, we struggle with it. We struggle with evaluation. Does that make sense? I mean,
yes.
We live in a world like we're conscious about our kids' homework, how they're doing on tests. We practice for sports. We do a lot of stuff to equip us and evaluate in every area of life. But in a lot of ways, at least from a physical standpoint, I mean, I know, Robert, we always say God always knows, and I know that's the case.
Mm-hmm.
But for flesh, man, for skin, we don't always know. And so, I'm putting out there today because I think it's so valuable. And man, I tell you, my email address, Robert, is clarksims45@gmail.com. And I'd love to have help if anybody had any suggestions, because it's a search for me to try to figure out and try to work through, are they getting and understanding what we're talking about? And I think it's worth the effort. And I know this is unusual, and I apologize for that, in presenting it this way, but I think that's a dilemma that we really face, because that's a question that needs to be answered, but I just don't think it's all that easy necessarily for us to find that answer. What do you think? Help me with it, Robert.
Well, I'm sitting here and I'm relating to what you're saying, because the moments when I have maybe realized that perhaps they're not getting it have been, and that this doesn't help to answer the question, but I think it speaks to it. Have been the moments when I've had opportunity to sit down one-on-one. We're talking about the young people, right?
Yeah.
So with members of the youth group, and
absolutely, that's right.
I've had them come to me individually and ask, "Can I meet with you and us just study?"
Yeah.
And I say, absolutely. Hey, who would turn down an opportunity like that?
Absolutely.
So
That's right.
I've been involved with some meetings, and we'll meet once a week for an hour each time, and we'll get that going. And as I'm speaking with them, it's hard for me to even understand where the point of breakdown is. But at the same time, it's hard for them to communicate what exactly they're feeling. But somewhere, we both know that we're not understanding each other. And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and and
Yeah.
ultimately that comes from I'm looking at this
Yeah.
person and they're saying, I don't get
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I think you're exactly right,
yeah.
though, that the more individual, and this would apply to parents,
Yeah. Yeah.
Bible class, the more individual conversations that we have, and how about this? Just a willingness to step back
Yes.
and listen to
Yeah.
what they're saying, and we've been around young people enough, we've lived it, we've experienced it, and we've worked with our own children and things, so
Mhm.
we know we can decipher things that they're saying, but it's very good when you can do that in some very personal settings. But I'm telling you, man, to me that's a sobering idea
Yeah.
that somebody can be in the right place, but they're just not getting it. And
Right.
that could be adults as well. But
Mhm.
I think it really applies. I put down in my notes, Robert, as I was looking at this, and I think this is the truth. But I think about my own specific growing up and my experiences. But we've lost a lot of young people who came out of the water.
Mhm.
They came out of the water, but at some point, along the way, they just they fell away, and I think that's where the injection of the preacher,
Mm.
is such a big deal of getting them from that new birth
Mhm.
to life, on their own. I just that's something that's pretty pressing, in my mind.
Yeah.
I don't know, Robert. I if and I don't know that I'll care, Robert. I don't know that I'll care. But if in eternity I
Mm.
had a question, one of the questions I might ask is, why does there not seem to be a lot that's stated in Scripture about those kids raised in the church?
Mm.
You know what I mean? I mean, we
Yeah.
see, we understand, but there's not a whole lot of really specific things about that young man and woman we had one of our young people at North Tuscaloosa today had a son, just a little while ago, a few hours old, and uh, you know,
Mm.
his coming out party will be brought to a church building. That's where you are, and that's where you experience life and all,
Yeah.
and I just, I thought about a good bit, that that as a general rule, over time, most of our young people, most of them are going to be baptized. I mean, it's sort of like, it's almost like it's rare,
Mhm.
for a kid to go through a youth, Bible, to grow up in a church and not be baptized, you know.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm not minimizing baptism at all. I understand, it's just, that's how you get forgiveness. That's why the blood of Jesus. I understand all of that, but
Yeah.
I also know that there's got to be more teaching, and it's going to help equip them for life beyond. Uh, uh,
Mm.
what was your school experience, Robert? Did you go off to school when you got out of high school?
I did. Yeah. So I grew up in Pulaski, Tennessee,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then I went to Freed Hardeman, which
yeah,
was about 120 miles from home for me.
yeah. Well, so I kind of went on. I went on a tour of Christian colleges. I went to Alabama Christian. It became Faulkner, and then I went
Hmm.
to Lipscomb, and then I graduated at Freed Hardeman. And frankly, Robert, none of them probably had me on the brochure, advertising their school. But I was, it was good at all of them. But anyway, I can remember when I got out of high school and I went to Alabama Christian in Montgomery, and I mean, I was raised in, never missed, and Bible class, and worship, and just engaged and involved, and basically every Sunday morning, my mama would come to the door, and wake us up, and time for breakfast, and time to get ready to go to Bible class.
Yeah.
And I can just remember how tough it was when I went off by myself, and I'm a freshman in college, and just the idea of getting up to go to Sunday school, you know, when
Mm-hmm.
when that's my decision. Nobody's there to force me to do it, and that's a lot of where I'm rambling right now
Mm.
is that function of the preacher to help get them ready for that moment when they're on their own, when they're not in, even if they're still living in your town, they're not in mom and daddy's house. They're making decisions on their own. Every one of my kids that live in my house they're members of the church. They're faithful. They're strong. They're great young people, and I don't question their faithfulness. But I also know, Robert, in my house, they don't have a lot of options. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm pretty strong on that idea. If you're in my house,
Yes.
that's where you're gonna be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so that presents the reality in front that what's going to happen at that time. So anything that we can
Mm.
do in our preaching to help answer questions, you know, I'm thinking about, Robert, there's so many things that are in our worship
Mm-hmm.
that are very obvious with our eyes and with our ears. You think about music, you can think about worship itself, items of worship, and who's leading in worship, and so many of those things that are obvious to the senses. But there's going to come a time that it's going to really matter, not just what I've experienced with my senses, but knowing the answer why. Knowing why we do what we do, and
Mm.
there, and it's just if we're not equipping them, then they're going to end up kind of lost. You know what? It's a sobering thing, and we're talking about preaching to the youth group, and we think in terms of those who are youth ministers and youth deacons, and who those that are working and leading with our young people. It's a delicate circumstance because it was talking about that evaluation earlier, but the reality is it's hard for us to evaluate at this moment. Much of the evaluation of the effectiveness of what we're doing is a down the line kind of thing.
Mm.
10 years from now, or when that eighth grade boy that's sitting there on the fourth row and he's with all the young people sitting there, when that guy's 30 years old
Yeah.
and he's married and he's got a 3-year-old son, where's he going to be on Sunday morning? What life choices is he going to make? So, we can't always see the effectiveness of what we're doing in a moment. We're really having to make an investment in something pretty far down the line. So,
Mm.
I don't know. Does the word overwhelming come up at all? I mean, it's almost overwhelming to think about the responsibility that's on our shoulder. It's just not something we need to take lightly at all.
Yeah. Well, and if nothing else, and I appreciated that you called it rambling. I don't know that I would call it rambling, but I appreciated the if nothing else, just your openness about all of this. I think we all
Yeah,
have felt it, though maybe we haven't articulated
yeah,
it the way
yeah,
that you just did, and I'm thankful for
yeah,
that. And two, I think that these things that you've mentioned, and particularly, well, really, I'm looking back through my notes here. Everything that you said, both
yeah.
factors before you preach and when you preach, these are things like when we keep these in mind, I guess it just helps us to be more intentional. I mean, again, we don't answer that question. How are they
Yeah,
getting it? But
yeah,
maybe if I'm being more intentional, at least it's at top of mind, and I can iterate
that's
and
right.
things like that
Yeah,
within that very brief
yeah,
window until they're
yeah,
18 and they go off
yeah,
someplace, and then we
yeah,
see whether they got it or not, right?
yeah. And and I guess somewhere, Robert, we've got to have a contentment
Yeah.
that we're knowing we're doing the very best that we can.
Hmm.
And it's not always easy to do that, but somehow we need to find a peace and a contentment that we're doing the very best we can with that moment of responsibility that we have.
Yeah.
You know, they introduce us as their preacher. We're in their home, we go to their ball games,
Mm.
and that's who we are. We're their preacher, and that doesn't just need to be a title. It needs to be a reflection of who we are in their lives. So it's a challenge I don't take lightly at all.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Yeah.
Preaching that will reach the youth group. Wow, these have been some really neat thoughts. Opportunity maybe in just a moment after we take a little break for some final thoughts or as we wrap things up.
Sure.
But want to remind everybody right now that Preachers in Training is brought to you by the Light Network, a network of podcasts designed to encourage your soul and enlighten your mind and empower your faith. We're here every Thursday from that website or from wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any of the players in that space. You can go and search for Preachers in Training, and if you enjoy the podcast, click the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And by the way, while you're at it, we're also on YouTube these days. We're recording a video version of this. If you're curious about what that image or what the picture was behind Brother Clark's head there with, as he says, the University of Alabama, then you can you can go and see a portion of it for yourself on our YouTube channel. Just search for The Light Network, click that subscribe button, and once again, you'll never miss an episode. Check out the other podcasts while you're there. Everything from finances from a Christian perspective to mental health to Wifey Wednesdays to archaeology and biblical faith. We've got a little bit of everything, and we're continually intentional about adding more and more. About 10 new episodes release every week on the weekdays, Monday through Friday. They're sort of scattered throughout there, and want to encourage you to be a part of that. And also, I got to tell you, we love to hear from you. If you would like to submit episode ideas or feedback, if you got an answer to the question, he gave his email address a moment ago, but we'd love to hear from you as well. Preachers@thelightnetwork.tv is where you can get in touch with me. And also, don't forget the Facebook group. Search for Preachers in Training. We'll be glad to welcome you into that group. And we have a lot of great conversations there, even obviously outside of this podcast, relative to preaching and ministry. And we'd love for you to be a part of that. Brother Clark Sims joins us today, pulpit minister and also one of the shepherds at the North Tuscaloosa Church of Christ there in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. We've been talking about preaching that will reach the youth group. As we sort of land the plane and maybe final words or exhortations to the preachers who are a part of this, or what do we need to say just as we conclude today?
Yeah, Robert, two quick things. Number one, we need to hold on to Proverbs 22:6. To train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. The pronoun it points directly to the training. Now, we don't know what decisions these young people are going to make as they go beyond their youth, but the training, what they've been taught, will stick with them. So be conscious, that what we're presenting, what we're sharing, where they're being trained is what they need to hear and to hold on to, and they won't depart from it. And the final thing is that I hold on to personally, and that is that in a number of ways, the preacher is that guy who can help that young person see Jesus. And they see it in the things that we say, but they also see it in the things that we do. And I think they'll grow in their appreciation for who Jesus is when they see him reflected clearly in our words, but also in the way that we live our lives. And by the way, you got about 30 seconds for a quick story as I close.
But of course,
if you don't mind.
absolutely.
Yeah, well, that was brought home a number of years ago. I was asked to speak in a youth program in Rome, Georgia, and it was on the campus of Berry College. Okay, and it's like this large outdoor, beautiful campus there, there in Rome, Georgia, and they had this event there on that campus, and there was like a multi-purpose center down on the kind of in a valley where the events were, and then you were housed up in a hilly area, like in cabins. And I went on that trip, and I took my son Christian with me, and so we were there, and it was dark. I think it was on a Saturday night, and it was the cabin was up in the woods, and and it was time for us to go down and go to that multi-purpose center for the evening service and activities. And I didn't really know where I was going. And I'm not, Robert, I'm not a man of the woods and all at all. I don't hunt and fish. I just reap the benefits of those who do. But I don't really do that myself. I'm just not a woodsman. And it was dark, and we had to get down that hill to get to the valley where that building was. And I had no idea where I was going. There's a guy there at that youth event, though. His name was Rusty. And Rusty knew exactly how to get to that building. So here's what happened when we left our cabin to go there. Christian was young at that time. Rusty started going, and he's walking down the hills and getting down to that place. And all I'm doing is following Rusty, because I feel like if I'm going behind Rusty, I'm going to get to where I need to be. Now, here's the thing about it, Robert. Rusty didn't mean a thing in this world really to Christian. He didn't know him, didn't know anything about him. All Christian knew was Dad. And so Christian's mindset was, I'm going to follow Dad. So it became this little trifecta going down that hill in the dark of in the trees and the woods to get to our desired location. Rusty knew where he was going. I followed Rusty, and Christian followed me. And I just think that's such a picture of who I am as a preacher, who I am in the presence of young people, both at North Tuscaloosa and any place that I might be blessed to be. I follow Jesus, and they can follow my example as I follow Jesus. I think that can help them to get a clear picture of where we need to be and who we need to follow. We're that guy in their lives in so many ways, and I hope that all in the sound of my voice will take that responsibility really seriously.
Wow. Yeah, that was powerful. Well, thank you, brother, for sharing your thoughts.
And thank you.
What a wonderful blessing this has been for us. And
thank you.
Wonderful way to for us personally here at Preachers in Training to kick off season 14, and we've got a lot of wonderful episodes ahead. I think you're going to be encouraged, and I think you're going to enjoy the season that is coming up, the Lord willing. Until then, though, I want to thank you for being a part of this episode. And hey, by the way, NorthTuscaloosa.com. Go and check them out if you're ever in the Tuscaloosa, Alabama area.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure that they would be happy to see you over there too.
Absolutely.
Thank you, brother. And thank you for being a part of Preachers in Training. Until next time, I'm Robert Hatfield. Let's go preach the word.